Welcome to the Hinder Daily.
We have a really packed set of sources for you today.
We really do.
We're looking at everything from a major constitutional question around judges to a pretty surprising study on what makes kids successful.
And even a secret Cold War city that's melting out from under the Greenland ice.
A literal toxic time bomb.
Let's jump right in with that first editorial. It's a big one. It's not often you see more than 100 members of parliament move to remove a sitting judge.
No, it's a huge deal. This is about the motion submitted back in December 2025.
Against Justice G.R. Swaminathan of the Madras High Court.
Exactly. You've got 107 MPs, all from the NDA bloc, who've put this notice before the Lok Sabha Speaker, Om Birla.
And the charges they're not minor.
Far from it. There are 13 separate allegations. We're talking about things like acting against secular principles and, showing clear favoritism to lawyers from one community.
But the article argues that this whole situation, it really shines a light on a very specific flaw in our system, a kind of mechanical problem with judicial accountability.
It really does. But before we get to that flaw, we should probably clear up a word that gets thrown around a lot here.
Impeachment.
Right. The media loves that word. But technically, that's not what's happening.
And the article says that distinction is important.
It is, because it sets the standard. In our Constitution, impeachment is a word reserved just for the president. That's Article 61.
Okay.
For judges, whether they're in the High Court or the Supreme Court, the Constitution uses the term removal. It's a different process, governed by Articles 124 and 124 and the Judges' Inquiry Act.
So this is a removal motion, but the standard for removal is... it's incredibly high, isn't it?
It's a massive bar to clear.
Yeah.
It's not about a judge just making a bad call in a case.
Or having a bad day in court.
Not at all. The standard is proved misbehavior or incapacity. And the Supreme Court has been very strict on what that means in past cases, like K. Veeraswamy and M. Krishnaswamy.
So what does misbehavior mean in this context?
It means there has to be a guilty mind. Mens rea. So we're talking about willful abuse of power, corruption, moral turpitude, something that really strikes at the heart of judicial integrity.
It has to be that bad to even start the process.
Exactly. So these 107 MPs believe that line has been crossed. They've gathered the signatures, which is the first big hurdle. You need 100 MPs in the Lok Sabha.
But then, this is where the system gets tricky. It all lands on the speaker's desk.
And this is the critical loophole the article points to. The Judges' Inquiry Act gives the speaker a statutory role. He gets the motion, he can consult people, and then he decides. He can either admit it or he can refuse it.
Okay, well, hold on. If you have that many MPs signing on, which feels like a democratic signal, why can the speaker just say no? Are there specific rules he has to follow?
And that is the entire problem. The law doesn't give him a checklist. There are no specified conditions for whether he should admit it or not.
So it's just up to him?
It's left to his discretion. And here's the kicker. If he rejects it, he doesn't have to give a detailed, reasoned explanation.
So the motion just dies?
It just dies.
Instantly?
That seems like a huge design flaw. The whole point of needing 100 signatures is to stop frivolous attacks, right?
It is.
But then you let one person, who was a political appointee, block a serious constitutional process without having to explain why.
That's the argument, yes. It brings a level of arbitrariness into what should be a transparent process. If the speaker says yes, then a proper inquiry committee is formed with judges on it, and they weigh the evidence.
This is how it should work.
But if the speaker just acts as a gatekeeper, that investigation never even starts. It basically allows the government of the day, through the speaker, to shield judges from any kind of accountability. It undermines the whole system of checks and balances.
There's a real tension there. Now, speaking of systems, let's move to the second editorial. This one is on the Juvenile Justice Act, and frankly, the data here seems to fly in the face of the popular narrative.
It really does. So there's a private member's bill from December 2025.
And it wants to lower the age at which children can be tried as adults for heinous crimes. Right now, that's for kids between 16 and 18.
And this bill wants to drop it.
It wants to drop that age down to 14.
And the argument we always hear is that, teen crime is out of control. But the numbers, they tell a different story.
A completely different story. If you look at the 2023 NCRB data, that's the National Crime Records Bureau.
Right.
Crimes by children make up just 0.5% of all registered crimes, half of 1%.
Wow.
And even within that tiny number, about 80% of those kids were in the 16 to 18 age group. The 14 to 16 group is not where the problem is, statistically.
So we're effectively creating a law for a crisis that doesn't exist. But the article's deeper point is about the mechanism itself, this transfer system. How do we decide if a 16-year-old should be tried as an adult right now?
It's based on a preliminary assessment by the Juvenile Justice Board. They're supposed to figure out if the child had the mental capacity of an adult when the act was committed.
But how can you possibly do that?
Well, the article argues you can't. It calls it pseudoscience. There's no scientific tool that can look back in time and say, ah, yes, at that exact moment, this child had an adult mind.
I remember reading that these assessments often come down to really flimsy things like, did the child seem scared or did they know what they did was wrong?
Exactly. And that's a terrible metric. A 7-year-old knows it's wrong to hit someone. That doesn't mean they have adult-level impulse control or foresight.
Of course not.
So the editorial's point is, if we push this flawed system down to 14-year-olds, we're just baking more arbitrariness into the law. We're taking vulnerable kids who need care and protection and shoving them into a punitive adult system.
The line that stood out to me was, fix the system, not the child. It feels like we're using the justice system as a band-aid for bigger social failures.
Which is a recipe for disaster. Adolescence isn't a crime, it's a stage of development.
Let's shift from social infrastructure to digital infrastructure. Our opinion piece today is on artificial intelligence. But it's not another what can ChatGPT do article. This is about the plumbing, the hardware.
Yeah, this is a much more fundamental conversation. The piece is called Sovereign Circuits, and it's all about the government's new white paper on AI infrastructure.
And the big idea.
The central idea is that we have to start thinking of computing power as a digital public utility.
Like electricity or roads.
Precisely.
Right.
You can't have a modern economy without power, and you won't have a future economy without compute. And right now, India has a huge problem there.
A deficit.
A massive one. We generate something like 20% of the world's data, which is the raw fuel for AI.
Okay.
But we only host 3% of the world's data center capacity.
That's a staggering mismatch. It sounds like we're a data colony. We export the raw material, our data, and then have to pay to use foreign machines to process it.
That's the sovereignty risk the article is all about. If your entire innovation ecosystem depends on Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, you're vulnerable to their prices, their rules, to geopolitics.
So the idea is sovereign AI. Does that mean India building its own everything from scratch?
Not necessarily isolationism, but building domestic capacity. The model they're looking at is our digital public infrastructure, like UPI.
Ah, I see.
The idea is to create platforms like this proposed AI Kosh, where Indian startups, researchers, even students can get access to high-performance computing without breaking the bank.
So a great idea from a student in a smaller city doesn't die just because they can't afford the server costs.
Exactly. But the article also flags the environmental side of this, which is huge.
These data centers use a ton of power and water.
They're energy hogs. So the white paper is clear that this has to be a green expansion. Green data centers, water-efficient cooling. That has to be part of the plan.
The conclusion is pretty powerful. Access is destiny.
It is. If you don't control the infrastructure, you don't control your future.
That phrase, access is destiny, also feels like a perfect bridge to our science segment. This is a study from the journal Science on peak human performance, and I think it's going to challenge a lot of common wisdom about raising kids.
Oh, this one is fascinating. It's a huge study. They looked at 35,000 top performers. We're talking Nobel laureates, elite athletes, chess grandmasters, the best of the best.
And what did they find?
The main finding is it's so counterintuitive. It turns out that the child prodigies, the kids who are #1 in the world at age 12, are almost never the ones who are #1 at age 25.
Wait, really? So the whole 10,000 hours rule, starting specialization at age 3, that's not the path.
The data says it's mostly a myth. They found a 90% difference between the group of top junior athletes and the group of top senior athletes.
90%. So they're almost completely different groups of people.
Almost no overlap. The kids who specialize very early, they tend to burn out or get injured or just they hit a ceiling.
So what did the successful adults do differently in their childhood?
They were samplers. They had what the researchers call a multidisciplinary childhood.
They tried a bunch of different things.
Exactly. The future tennis star also played soccer and swam. The future Nobel-winning scientist also played the violin and did debate. This breadth, the argument goes, builds flexible thinking.
It's about connecting ideas from different fields.
Right. A chemistry student who also knows some coding and physics will see a problem differently than someone who only knows chemistry. It's about cognitive range.
That makes a lot of sense. But the article mentions a statistical critique of the study, something called Bergson's paradox, or collider bias.
Right, and this is the important nuance. We have to be careful not to take this as, don't let your kids practice.
So what is collider bias, in simple terms?
Okay, so imagine you only look at players who made it into the NBA. You might notice that the shorter players are all exceptionally skilled shooters. You might then conclude that being short makes you a better shooter.
But that's obviously wrong.
It's wrong. Being tall helps you get into the NBA. The short guys had to be amazing shooters just to get into the sample group in the first place.
Ah, I see. So the critics are saying the study only looked at top performers, so we're not seeing all the kids who tried many things but never became elite at anything.
That's the argument.
No.
But the study's authors push back. They said their point isn't that practice doesn't matter. It's that when you compare the successful adults to the ones who peaked early and then faded, the successful ones actually had less specific practice in their childhood. They didn't lock in so early.
So the takeaway isn't don't specialize, it's don't specialize too soon.
Exactly. Generalize first, it seems to be a real advantage.
Let's move from the science of success to the laws of the land. In the text and context section, we're circling back to the Supreme Court and the Prevention of Corruption Act. There is a split verdict on Section 17A.
This is a classic dilemma. How do you protect honest public servants from harassment while still being able to punish corrupt ones?
And Section 17A is right in the middle of that.
It is. It was added to the law in 2018. And what it says is that before a police agency can even start investigating a public servant for a decision they made in their official capacity.
Just investigating, not even charging them.
Correct. Just to start an inquiry, they need to get prior approval from the government.
And the Supreme Court is split on whether that's constitutional.
Yes, a 1-to-1 split. On one side, you have Justice K.V. Viswanathan. He says we need this section. His argument is that without it, you get policy paralysis.
The play it safe syndrome.
Exactly. If honest officers are terrified that every decision could lead to a CBI probe, they'll just stop making decisions. He thinks this shield is necessary to prevent frivolous complaints from ruining careers and freezing government.
That makes sense. But Justice B.V. Nagarathna sees it very differently.
She struck it down completely. She called it old wine in a new bottle, saying the court has already rejected similar protections in cases like Vinay Narain.
Her argument is about equality.
It's Article 14, equality before the law. Why should a public servant get a special shield from investigation that you or I don't get? She argues there are already protections in law for the prosecution stage, so adding this barrier at the very beginning just helps shield the corrupt.
It effectively creates a protected class of citizen.
That's the heart of her argument. And because it's a split verdict, the whole issue now has to go to a larger bench to be decided.
From legal battles to military drills. Our next piece takes us to the Taiwan Strait, China's Justice Mission 2025 drills at the end of last year. The article says this was a new level of escalation.
Yes, this was more than just posturing. The drills happened in late December. You had the usual things like mock blockades and over 100 air sorties.
A lot of planes crossing the median line.
90 of them, yes. But the really worrying part, the part that has analysts concerned, was about the rockets. For the first time, Chinese rockets landed in Taiwan's contiguous zone.
And the contiguous zone is that area just outside their territorial waters.
It is. It's that 24 nautical mile buffer. To land rockets there is extremely provocative. The message is, we are right on your doorstep, we can hit you.
And what was the trigger for this round of drills?
Beijing pointed to two things: separatist forces in Taiwan and a new, massive $11 billion arms deal between the Trump administration and Taiwan.
So this was a direct response.
It seems so, but the source also points to a critical problem inside Taiwan. They're trying to build up their defenses, this T-dome system, but their own internal politics are getting in the way.
The legislature is deadlocked.
Completely. The president's party, the DPP, is pro-defense. But the opposition parties, the KMT and TPP, control the legislature, and they keep blocking the defense budgets.
So as the threat from the outside grows, the ability to respond on the inside is frozen.
It's a dangerous situation, and it's making the whole region nervous. The Prime Minister of Japan, Sana Takeichi, used some very strong language.
What does she say?
She called a potential attack on Taiwan a survival-threatening situation for Japan, which is basically diplomatic code for we would get involved.
Wow. That raises the stakes for everyone.
Immensely.
All right, let's step back in time now. From a modern powder keg to a conflict in 1949 that was, well, it's about numbers. This article on India's constitutional struggle over numerals is just incredible.
It's one of those bits of history that could have gone so differently. Everyone knows about the big Hindi versus English debate in the Constituent Assembly.
Right.
But there was this other, equally intense fight, specifically about the numerals. Would we use the Devanagari numerals or the international ones, 1, 2, 3?
It sounds like such a small thing now, but the article says it nearly split the assembly.
It came down to a tie vote,
Mm-hmm.
74 to 74.
Hmm.
On one side, you had the traditionalists, who saw the Devanagari numerals as a key part of India's identity.
And on the other,
You had modernists like Nehru and many members from the South who were arguing that for science, for banking, for engaging with the world, we had to use the international system. You can't function if your numbers aren't universally understood.
so a 74-74 tie. How on earth did they break that deadlock?
With a bit of genius political phrasing, they came up with something called the Munshi-Iyengar formula.
Okay.
The Constitution officially adopted the international form of Indian numerals.
Ah, international form of Indian numerals. That is very clever.
It was a masterstroke because it leaned on a historical truth. The numeral system we call international actually originated in India with the decimal system. It just traveled to Europe via the Arabs.
So the compromise was basically, we're not adopting a foreign system, we're reclaiming our own.
We're reclaiming our own global contribution. It was a brilliant way to save face, ensure administrative clarity, and hold the country together. It was a victory for accommodation over imposition.
A small symbol with a huge constitutional truth behind it. That's fantastic. Okay, for our final story, we're heading north, way north, to the Arctic for a story about Project Iceworm.
This one reads like a Cold War thriller. In 1959, the U.S. Army built a secret base called Camp Century deep inside the Greenland ice sheet.
The official story was that it was for science.
Right. But the real top-secret mission was called Project Iceworm. The plan was to dig thousands of kilometers of tunnels and hide 600 nuclear missiles under the ice, all aimed at the Soviet Union.
Hiding nuclear missiles inside a moving glacier, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, the engineers made a fundamental mistake. They thought the ice was a solid, like rock, but it isn't. It's a viscoelastic fluid.
It moves.
It flows, like incredibly slow, incredibly heavy liquid. After just a few years, the tunnel started to warp and buckle. The whole base was being crushed by the ice. They had to abandon it in 1967.
But they didn't exactly pack up all their things when they left.
Not even close. They just walked away, assuming the annual snowfall would bury it all forever. They left everything. 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, radioactive coolant from the nuclear reactor, PCBs, sewage.
A toxic mess.
And now, because of climate change, the ice is melting. Scientists are predicting that all of that toxic waste is going to start leaching out into the ocean by the end of this century.
That's horrifying, but the article points out a really strange twist of fate here involved in climate science itself.
It's the ultimate irony. The ice cores that were drilled at Camp Century, as part of its scientific cover story, were the very same ice cores that allowed scientists like Willie Dansgaard to discover the history of abrupt climate change.
So the base that's now a climate change time bomb.
Provided the foundational evidence that proved climate change was real and could happen quickly, the military accidentally funded the discovery of the very thing that is now exposing its secret mess.
And this has created a huge diplomatic problem today.
A massive one. The U.S. wants access to Greenland for strategic reasons. But Denmark and Greenland look at the U.S. as the article calls them, a reckless tenant who poisoned the land and now refuses to pay for the cleanup.
It's a legacy of the Cold War literally melting into our present.
It really is. From constitutional debates to melting glaciers, it just shows how the decisions of the past are never really past.
They're always with us. What a tour. Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.